观众朋友您好，欢迎收看华尔街连线。目前，美国和中国高级别的贸易谈判正在北京举行。美国谈判代表星期五将会晤中国国家主席习近平。在星期四的谈判现场有人发现刘鹤、莱特希泽母女亲合影照，不是拍了1次，而是拍了3次，3位轮流居中照了一遍。有分析称，这么拍是有讲究的，既体现对谈判对手的尊重，也是注重细节的礼仪之邦。但也有分析指出，中方这么做或许是有意混淆莱特希泽是美方主要负责人的地位，让这位鹰派有口难言。白宫经济顾问库德洛星期四在接受福克斯新闻采访时说，习近平将会晤美国谈判代表团是一个积极的迹象。他还说，美国的谈判代表正在努力完成这一次贸易使命。目前各方放话角力，口径不一。此前，彭博新闻社援引知情人士透露的消息报道说，川普总统考虑把提高中国进口商品关税的最后期限再延长60天，但新华社随后予以否认，称暂时还没有此计划。另外，最新的贸易数据出炉，1月份中国出口回升，恢复了增长，进口下滑也有所放缓。尽管分析师们并不认为出口总值的跃升表明经济在强劲的复苏。周四公布的官方统计数据显示，以美元计价的出口同比增长了 9.1%， 高于路透社调查经济学家给出的 3.2% 的预测中值，与去年12月份 4.4% 的下滑相比是个回升。另外一方面，进口也超出预期，但降幅仍然达到了 1.5%。人们对中国国内投资和消费走弱的担忧并未减轻。综合而言，1月份的贸易顺差为392亿美元。我们今天请到了美国罗格斯大学商学院法学教授罗克·康特拉克特。他在去年接受新华社采访时就曾经谈到了美国消费者如何享受而不是遭受贸易赤字。他说，川普政府对中国施加关税表明它存在对贸易关系的误解。谈到最新的贸易数字，他表示1月份中国出口回升可能是抢出口效应，由于害怕关税上升，所以商家们都提前储备了大量的商品，关税目前还没有发挥什么作用。相比于美商回流，更多的美国企业会选择越南或者台湾，关税很难改变现有的供应链。谈到华为的问题，他表示，中美两国企业的行业标准不一样，因此美国不能用同样的标准去要求华为。中国2025计划让川普政府感到了威胁，美国企业不应该惧怕与华为的竞争，相反，这样的竞争可以促进科技进步。另外，他还把中美之间的贸易战与40年前的美日贸易战做了对比。同样是知识产权的转让，最大的不同是日本当年付了大量的知识产权费给美国和欧洲的公司，而中国却是在向玩版权游戏。专利窃取这件事在历史上早就发生过，他谈到1000年以前，丝绸和茶叶市场都是被中国人垄断的，但后来都被窃取走了。关于这2天的贸易谈判，他说有2个难点，一是如果中国购买更多的美国商品，有可能会造成的后果是损害本国企业的利益。第二点是，尽管中国可以在立法上阻止强制技术转让，但很难从根本上杜绝这样的情况发生。
I think the increase in the trade is simply because of the fear of additional tariffs, making people increase their inventories. So the tariffs are not having their desired effect as yet. And our business is moving back to the U.S. Very slightly. I mean, it's a very tiny percentage of companies that have decided to bring business back or manufacturing back to the U.S. And more likely, it is very difficult to change suppliers and adjust supply chains. And even with that difficulty, the greater likelihood is that the bulk of Chinese production would move not necessarily back to the U.S., but maybe to other countries like Vietnam or Taiwan or Bangladesh for garments. pain suffered by Chinese exporters or suppliers, because even though right now the exports are doing well from China to the U.S., the fear of additional tariffs has upset a lot of Chinese exporters, and they're withholding investment that they might otherwise have made. So there's a slight problem. And in general, the Chinese economy is slowing down partially because of the fear of a trade war escalating. Well, there are very few winners in this kind of thing, because more trade generally means a win-win situation for both parties, and less trade, not always, but generally it means a lose-lose situation for both countries. So who is benefiting? Maybe a few American companies that are increasing their manufacturing. And yes, American manufacturing output has increased somewhat in the last year or so, but not significantly, not hugely. Well, I'm not an expert in IT or mobile telephony, but we do know that China has, one way or the other, almost caught up with the U.S. in mobile telephony. I mean, that's the conventional reports. Now, of course, the American government will say that the Chinese companies like Huawei have caught up by some dubious means. They will claim that. It's also true, I should add immediately, that Huawei now also has its own very strong R&D. So one way or the other, whether in the past they copied or whatever, and now Chinese companies, and mainly Huawei, has very good rival technology. Now, whether China is beating the U.S. is, I think only an expert could say. I'm not an IT expert. But I'll add one thing. One country beating another is also a function of whether the nation or the region adopts a certain technical standard. And that's really where the issue lies, because Huawei's and the Chinese standards are technically different from the American and European standards. And so whoever adopts what standard will determine the market share and success of American versus Chinese companies. But one thing we can say, that the Chinese have almost caught up with the U.S., and that's what is making many politicians like President Trump and company scared about, after reading the China 2025 plan and the ambitions of Chinese companies. Well, I don't think it's much to do with the trade war. It's more, as I said, that the openly declared ambitions of the Chinese government in China 2025 have scared a lot of American companies and government officials. So that now, of course, there is political consequences, in the sense that it's not just the arrest of the daughter of the founder or the CFO. It's more that Huawei is now being blacklisted by a lot of course, is blacklisted by the American defense establishment. And also the American government has told private companies not to buy from Huawei. So it's more it's part of the technology race, if you will. But in general, free market economists would say that if there is a technology race, that is in the long run good, because it makes innovation go faster. And the U.S. should not be afraid of a technology race because that's what makes technology progress. And the U.S. companies are not lagging in capacity to be in the race. They're also strong companies.
Okay, about the trade war from a long historical perspective, the Chinese are more or less following the Japanese government policy example during the period 1960 to 1980. What's the difference?
Well, the one main difference is that the Japanese were very particular about not violating patents and intellectual property, and they were paying Americans and Europeans for the licensing of technology very handsome royalties. So in those days, you didn't have the capacity for cyber espionage or industrial espionage, and the Japanese generally were behaving themselves quite well and willing to pay money for imported European and American technology. So the main difference is that now, allegedly, Chinese companies are playing a slightly different game through cyber espionage, industrial espionage, trying to copy. And by the way, I'll say something about copying shortly, meaning that it has been happening for more than 1,000 years. Whereas the Japanese were very sort of straightforward. They're saying, we want your technology, you become our partners, joint venture partners, and we will... History shows that American companies were not complaining about the Japanese as much as they're complaining about Chinese partners demanding their technology. That's the difference.
Okay.
But talking about, copying, that's a time-honored tradition. China had a monopoly on silk, and two Christians came, I think this was in the year 500 or something, 1,500 years ago, and they secretly carried out with them, when they went back to Constantinople, what is now Istanbul, they were carrying hollow walking sticks made of bamboo, and inside were silkworms. So the Chinese monopoly was broken at that time. Similarly, the Chinese had a monopoly for many centuries on tea. Nobody else was producing tea. And there were several attempts on the part of Europeans, the British, the Dutch, and so on, to smuggle out tea bushes. It didn't succeed, actually. What happened was that on the southern slope of the Himalayas, in what is the Indian state of Assam today, a British guy found a bush which was very similar and almost identical to the Chinese tea bush. And that started the rivalry, because tea was then grown in India, and then it spread to Sri Lanka and many other places, and the Chinese monopoly was broken. Similarly, I think in the 18th century or 19th century, the UK had a monopoly on, or a technical advance in textile equipment and spinning, weaving textiles and so on. And it was a very severe offense, punishable by 10 years in jail, if a British technician immigrated to the US with designs, plans, and tools. But that didn't work. There was, people did it anyway and took their designs and the British technology to the US, so that US textile production, I think by the 1830s, 1840s, was much bigger than the UK production. So I'm not condoning industrial espionage. I'm simply saying that it has been going on for a long time. Now, of course, the stakes are much higher because we're in a globalized world, and whoever wins the 5G race. Actually, I think it won't be, the outcome of 5G will be that there'll be two standards. One a Chinese-led standard and one will be a US-European standard. And there'll be rival standards. But the stakes today are higher. It's not just textiles, it's not just tea, or not just silk. You're talking about trillions of dollars at stake for the global market. Well, the problem, there are two problems. One is that if China agrees to buy a lot from the U.S., it can hurt their own producers. Now, maybe not in soybeans, but in other areas when Chinese are producing, and if their production and sales go down because the Chinese government is buying more from the U.S., that's part of the difficulty. The other part of the difficulty is that in the technology war area, so-called technology race or whatever, the U.S. is making demands that are very difficult for the Chinese government to accept, saying essentially, don't try and rival us in certain technical areas, and observe intellectual property laws, which can be enforced. I mean, the Chinese government can enforce and ask all its state companies, SOEs and private companies, to strictly observe intellectual property law, but it's been this copying and imitation. By the way, not all imitation is illegal. You know, sometimes you can read another company's patent and you get the idea, then you do your own R&D and you come up with a similar design which may not be violating the patent. So that tendency, that habit of many decades in China's development is not going to be easy for the Chinese government to tell its companies to stop. That's the problem.